Okay, let's try this again. I apologize for that. So you'll want to demonstrate linking. You'll want to attend to the here and now. You want to reflect, challenge possibly. You want to draw out from members who are quiet. You want to reframe a conversation if it's going in a inappropriate direction, or possibly reframe a situation where it's more strength-based. You'll want to deepen the focus. You might have to cut off we talked about that briefly, a very talkative member. You might have to shift focus if the focus becomes too driven, that's not topic related, that's not related to the overall mission or content that you wanted for the group. You talked about rounds. We'll talk about dyads at the very end. So introducing the group. This doesn't have to be too fancy. You'll get credit if you just somehow set the stage for what you want to do. So for instance, welcome. Last week we discussed relationships and how they can both help and harm our mental fitness. There was a lot that came up from this. I'd like to continue with this topic with a slight twist. First, I want to see if there are any lingering thoughts or feelings from last week. That might be good, especially this week here. So if you want to check in, if let's say that there was a group that went before yours and there were a lot of emotions that came up and they weren't really resolved. You had a member that looked like they really wanted to talk. Maybe they didn't get to. Maybe it felt like you left things hanging. I would suggest that you be flexible with your groups, especially this weekend coming up and maybe even into the final weekend, where you give yourself some leeway to just go with the flow of where the group is going. So if you have a topic that is really fertile, it's leading to some very meaningful conversations, I would suggest sticking with that till all members have a chance to really jump in and give what they would like to the topic. You don't have much time. If we're looking at 30-35 minutes, many times you might hear from one or two members quite a bit on a topic and then not hear from the other 6. So if it is going that way, and you have other people that look very engaged with the topic, I would recommend sticking with it. And then, you could start with a brief exercise that might be good for the end. You'll be planning a group, and I'll go over that next week. So you're going to plan to deliver not only your final group for class, but you're also going to design a group that you could use in your profession. And those can be one and the same. And we'll talk about that more next week. A summarization example. Summary is really good to use at the end of the group. Typically, people get credit when they summarize what has been said. Summaries are also good for transitions. So if you are transitioning from like an introductory activity to the main portion, the main idea of the group, those are good times to use summaries. So this is an example. Themes that stood out to me from today's group were loss and guilt. Many members discussed, you can even name members by name, since it's a confidential setting, how loss impacted them. Also discussed some very difficult emotions. We're leaving here with some seeds of hope as well. So that's a good summary. You don't always have to use it at the end. Like I mentioned, you can use it to transition from topic to topic. Linking is excellent. Linking is an advanced skill. We're talking about advanced skill this week. And so, for instance, if you see common themes coming up between members, this is a good time to go ahead and mention it. So, for instance, Joe, you mentioned feeling a sense of isolation just now. Pedro, you mentioned something similar to that earlier. That would be linking. If you remember something from earlier in the day that a member said and it came up later in a subsequent group, there's somebody else that's leading, that's important. You can bring that out too. It shows that you attended and that you are really present with your group. Amanda, it sounds like you can relate to what Jenna is saying. Jamal, I wonder if there's something similar to what Shandi expressed. attending to the here and now. This is definitely an advanced skill. And this is drawing attention to the emotions, the things that are coming up right now. A lot of times these can be felt rather than really thought of. In other words, you are bringing attention to something that may be going on. Maybe the group feels very heavy, like there's a heavy topic, or everybody shared a laugh. So for instance, here might be a few things. Jesse, you're talking about a worry that you push people away. I wonder how you'd feel about asking your group members how they see this manifesting in our interactions here. So if you see somebody talking about a trait that they have and they're exhibiting it in group, draw attention to it. I've noticed that as we were talking about external relationships, some of you have visible reactions. What's going on for you right now? So somebody has a big sigh or looks away or puts their head in their hands or looks like they're going to cry. What's coming up for you? Draw some attention to that. That's the here and now. What's happening emotionally right here and now. Those are powerful because when you draw attention to the here and now, it helps the group be cohesive. It helps develop that cohesion. They're the reflection examples. These to me are part of micro skills. As you are listening to your people in the folks in a group, your group members, you feel saddened and heartsick. That's a very deep reflection to what somebody is talking about in their emotions. Now, you don't want to do this too much. In other words, you want to make sure that your reflections are well placed, because it can be a situation. I observed this a few times the first week, that it starts to become just individual sessions with each group member. And you want the group to have the space to be able to interact with each other. Challenging can be difficult, and you definitely want some rapport with your group before you challenge. So for instance, Alexis, I hear you talking about your desire to be valued by your partner. From what you've mentioned here, I wonder if you're placing value on him. Sometimes it's difficult to give love when you don't feel it. Maybe somebody is being disrespectful. Seems like you're disrespecting this other member. Challenging. So this might be a way to cut off somebody. You're taking a lot of space in this group. So he's just, maybe you've tried to cut them off before and divert into and help them know that they're talking too much. Sometimes it's important just to challenge. I challenged one lady at Adams State where she was talking about a relationship that she had, and she was talking about all these things that she wanted to do professionally. She wanted to help people. Her heart was on her sleeve. She had a lot of compassion for helping others. Yet she was in a very shallow relationship. She was talking about, yeah, he buys me this, he buys me this. We're going on a trip to Cancun. And then I have a new car that he bought me. And she's talking about this in a group and just laughing and giggling. And people are talking about, this seems incongruent. Yeah. And she's just laughing about it. And so I said, your affect is completely incongruent with the depth of what you're talking about right here. You're laughing about things that deeply conflict with who you are. And you saw a big change. And some of it, the color shifted because she would divert with humor and superficial emotions, when in reality, she had some very deep dissonance and incongruence within her. Now, she shut down and she didn't talk. And you're like, well, Taylor, was that the right thing to do as a group leader? And I would argue is yes, because what I did is I gave her something to think about as she moved forward, because she consistently refused to go into those feelings. I got good feedback from the folks in that group. And I never got any negative feedback from her. So what I strongly know is that I hit on something that was really going on. So challenging, I had a good rapport with him, and you really have to have a decent rapport. She spoke to me after the group. So you really have to have a decent rapport with people when you challenge them. Drawing out is really important for quiet members. and it can be just people who say something maybe meaningful and you can tell there's meaning under it, and you just say, hey, yes, tell me more. Or somebody who's quiet. Luke, we haven't heard from you in a while. What are your thoughts in this? Drawing attention. So you get points for that as group leader. Jill, you have a unique perspective on this, if you'd be willing to share. I'm more apt to ask permission. If I'm in an individual counseling session, I might just straight say, tell me about this experience. If I'm in a group, I'm more courteous. I'm less assertive with members, because generally I want them to feel comfortable with sharing before I just put them on the spot and say, hey, share. Here are a couple examples of reframing. Instead of being mean intentionally, perhaps she is just having a bad day. So, somebody gets called out because, well, you're being a bitch in group. Well, rather than, her, questioning her character, maybe this is just a bad day. Tell us more about what happened. Maybe this decision isn't good or bad. It could just be the best decision for you right now. So reframing things. Could there be another way to look at the reason you failed the test other than your intelligence? I'm just stupid. Somebody who that's a very CBT thing, cognitive behavioral. Tell me other logical things that could have gotten in the way of your exam success. So again, this reframing, it does borrow from cognitive behavioral counseling, but it can be very useful. And so if nobody else goes there, if nobody else challenges group members, and you feel like, hey, they're on the hook, it's your responsibility. Then that's when you pick up the ball as a counselor and start to use some of your counseling skills, these more advanced skills. Deepening the focus, I'm going to draw attention to reflections. Reflections often deepen the focus. I hear you talking about, I hear your pain here. What does Sam mentioning her losing her parents mean to you? It helps to move to the here and now. That's, when you move to the here and now, you are deepening the focus. As I mentioned previously, a lot of these things overlap. Cutting off, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this slide. It's for people that are really taking over and railroading the group, maybe in a direction that is not beneficial for the group. So you have some immense wisdom in this area. Who would you like to invite to share their perspective? So somebody goes off on a topic and you kind of even empower them more. So who would you like to invite to share about their experience? Like, okay, we've heard from you enough. You choose somebody to talk about this topic. Jack, I appreciate your passion for this topic. I'd like to make sure others can talk about this as well. Thanks for getting the ball rolling. And some people take the cue and some people don't. Shifting focus. Well, one of the things I talked about in the previous group, I'm not sure I talked about it with everybody because I think this was during our breakout sessions, but sometimes people can talk about just abstract things like, if so-and-so would have run for Congress, things would have been a lot better. And if the school district would just do this, I could do this. Okay, well, how does that relate to you? Tell me specifically how that relates to you in your day-to-day life. That can shift the focus from an abstract, or maybe somebody's talking about, well, my in-laws, they just do this, this, and this, and this. They're griping. It's a gripe session. And so you bring that in. How does that affect us here? That shifts the focus appropriately. Those are some sophisticated group skills, because you recognize, hey, the focus is out here. It's not in where it needs to be. And you're welcome to read through the other bullet points there. Rounds are very simple. Rounds just make sure that you get a listen to everybody. I used rounds intentionally when I did group to make sure I heard from everybody, because I wanted to make sure that everybody's voice was heard. I didn't want everybody to feel like they were just completely left out. And so you can use that at the beginning. You can use that at the end. I like to do that just as a practice to make sure I know where everybody is. Now, dyads are something unique. This is the last thing that we'll really cover. I didn't use dyads in previous groups because I had smaller groups. I think I had 6 people, but we have some larger groups here that are demonstrating. And so because there are 8 of us, you could lead with a partner and have people break out into dyads and say, pair up. We're going to talk about an activity. And what I want you to do when in this pair is create a group of list norms you'd like to see for our group. And then we'll share in the larger group. So, or you could say, come up with a partner, come up with 5 emotionally challenging things that you feel as students in common. And so basically what you do is, and this is also, if you have groups that have quieter members that don't want to share, this is also excellent to draw out quieter members, and that they may not talk in front of the whole group, but if they're paired up with just one other member, and you basically what you do is you split out of the whole group, maybe take 5 or 10 minutes in pairs, and then come back and talk about it. Those are dyads. And I'd say that those things could be really useful to educators, to the school counselors out there, is if you're doing a larger group, sometimes you have like 24 students in a class. If you give each pair of students like a task where they go and they have to do something for 5 or 10 minutes, that can be more effective than trying to hear from 24 different people. Then you have 12 snippets of information where another person is represented. I'm going to encourage you, if you want to use a dyad, you're more than welcome to. But there are some times with smaller groups where dyads just aren't effective. So I would say under 8 people, you're probably not going to find that dyads are that useful. Okay, well, gang, I hope this has been useful. The last thing I think was on this slide that I didn't get to was maybe content versus process. Content groups are, hey, we're going to work on anger, and we're going to work on anger management techniques. Process groups are, let's talk about things that make us angry, and then you share. So process groups you can find universality and cohesion a lot of times in process groups that are missed where you're just giving like content. So I hope this is helpful. Please reach out if you have any questions. Please pay attention to the discussion board. You are responsible for the full discussion, your initial post before Thursday at midnight, and then also 2 well thought out responses to your peers. I look forward to grading your stuff. I haven't had a chance, but I was out of town much of last week. So if you can reach out if you have questions, otherwise, I look forward to seeing you Saturday. Take care.